I found the email by accident, the way you always find the things that destroy you, not through careful investigation or justified suspicion, but through pure chance, mundane and terrible. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks before Christmas, and I was using my daughter Emma's laptop because mine had decided to die in the middle of updating my holiday shopping spreadsheet. Her computer was open on the kitchen table, still logged into her email, and there at the top of her inbox was a message with the subject line, "Christmas dinner, final confirmation for the big reveal." I'm 60 years old, and I've learned that subject lines like that never mean anything good. But I clicked anyway, my finger moving before my brain could intervene, and what I read in those 3 short paragraphs made my hands shake so badly I almost dropped the laptop. My daughter, my Emma, 35 years old, successful attorney, mother of my 2 grandchildren, the person I thought I knew better than anyone in the world, was planning to announce at Christmas dinner that she was leaving her husband David. Not just leaving him, but leaving him for someone else, someone she'd been seeing for over a year. Someone who would also be at our Christmas dinner because I'd invited him, having no idea that he was the man destroying my daughter's marriage. The email was to her lawyer, confirming that divorce papers would be filed the day after Christmas, that she'd already rented an apartment, that she'd worked out a custody arrangement, that everything was ready. All she had to do was drop the bomb in front of the entire family on the one day a year when we were all together, watching my grandchildren open presents, pretending we were the kind of happy family that exists in holiday movies. I closed the laptop, sat there in my kitchen, the kitchen where I'd fed Emma as a baby, where she'd done homework at this same table, where I'd taught her to bake cookies, and believed I was raising someone who understood loyalty and commitment. The afternoon light was fading, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floorboards, and the house smelled like the cinnamon candles I always burned in December. Everything was exactly as it should be, except my daughter was planning to destroy her family at Christmas dinner, and I had no idea what to do about it. I'm telling you this because what I found in that email was only the beginning. Over the next 3 weeks, as Christmas approached with its relentless cheer and forced togetherness, I uncovered a truth so much worse than a simple affair. And by the time Christmas dinner arrived, I'd made my own plans for a revelation, one Emma would never see coming. My name is Margaret Sullivan, and until that Tuesday afternoon, I thought I'd done a good job as a mother. I'd raised Emma alone after her father died when she was 8, a car accident that left me a widow at 33 with a grieving child and no idea how to build a life from the wreckage. But I'd managed. I'd worked as a teacher, kept food on the table, got Emma through school and college and law school, stood beside her at her wedding to David 12 years ago, and thought, I did it. I raised a good person who makes good choices. I was wrong about that last part. Emma had always been intense, driven, ambitious, competitive in ways that sometimes worried me. She'd been the kind of child who cried if she got second place in anything, who studied until she made herself sick, who seemed to believe that love and approval had to be earned through achievement. I'd tried to teach her that she was enough just as she was, but somewhere along the way, that message got lost, buried under the pressure she put on herself to be perfect. She'd married David right after law school. He was a good man, steady, kind, patient in ways Emma wasn't. He worked as an architect, designed sustainable buildings, coached their kids' soccer teams. He was the kind of father who showed up to every school event, who helped with homework without being asked, who seemed genuinely content with the quiet domestic life Emma found suffocating. I'd noticed the distance between them growing over the past few years. The way Emma checked her phone constantly during family dinners, the way she and David barely touched anymore, sitting on opposite ends of the couch when they visited, speaking to each other in that overly polite tone couples use when they're performing happiness for an audience. But I thought it was just the normal stresses of marriage and careers and raising children. I thought they'd work through it. I hadn't thought my daughter was capable of betrayal, of planning to blow up her family at Christmas dinner for maximum dramatic impact, like this was some reality TV show instead of real lives being destroyed. After reading that email, I spent hours sitting at the kitchen table, watching the light change, trying to decide what to do. Confront Emma immediately? Tell David? Pretend I'd never seen anything and let Christmas dinner unfold as planned? But there was something else in that email that bothered me. Something about the wording, the tone. Emma had written, "I know this will hurt people, but they'll understand eventually, especially once they know the truth about David." The truth about David. What truth? David was boring, yes, a little too earnest, a little too satisfied with his ordinary life, but what secrets could a man who coached children's soccer and designed green buildings possibly have? I decided to find out. That night, I called Emma, keeping my voice casual, asking about her holiday plans, as if I had just read her email detailing the systematic destruction of her marriage. "Everything's on track, right?" I asked. "Yes, Mom, same as always. Dinner at 6, everyone brings a dish. And David's family is coming too. Just his sister and her kids. His parents are doing a cruise this year." "What about," I pretended to check a list, "did you invite Marcus?" A pause. Too long. "Yes, Marcus is coming." Marcus Chen. David's best friend since college, the architect in David's firm who I'd met countless times at parties and family gatherings, the man with the easy smile and the expensive clothes, who always brought excellent wine and talked about his travels like he was collecting experiences instead of just living his life. The man who'd been sleeping with my daughter for over a year. I hadn't known that when I mentioned his name, had just been testing, seeing if Emma would react. Her pause told me everything. "That's nice," I said, keeping my voice light. "Mom, I need to go. The kids need help with homework." She hung up quickly, too quickly. I sat there, holding my phone, thinking about Marcus Chen and how many times he'd sat at my table, eating food I'd cooked, playing with my grandchildren, shaking David's hand, while secretly sleeping with his wife. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Christmas dinner, about my grandchildren, Jake, who was 9, and Sophie, who was 7, sitting there opening presents while their mother announced she was leaving their father, about David's face when he heard, about the way this single moment would fracture our family permanently. But I kept thinking about that phrase too, once they know the truth about David. What truth? David, boring, earnest, who designed sustainable buildings and coached soccer, was under investigation for fraud? I kept reading, found more references scattered through their messages. Something about falsified documents, bribery, a project that had gotten approval through illegal means. David had apparently been involved in something criminal, and Marcus, who worked at the same firm, had found out. Had told Emma, had convinced her that exposing David publicly was the only way to protect herself and the children. And Emma had believed him, or at least she was planning to use this information to justify her affair, to make herself the victim instead of the villain. I had to leave him. He was involved in fraud, played much better than I fell in love with his best friend and betrayed him. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking. Was it true? Was David actually involved in fraud? Or was this another layer of manipulation? Marcus inventing accusations to drive a wedge between Emma and David, to make Emma dependent on him. I needed to know, and I only had 3 weeks before Christmas dinner. I spent the next 3 days gathering information the way I'd once researched lesson plans, methodically, obsessively, following every lead. I started with David's firm, called, pretending to be a potential client interested in sustainable architecture, asked to speak with someone about their recent projects. The receptionist connected me to a junior architect who spent 20 minutes enthusiastically describing their work. I asked specifically about David Walsh. "Oh, David's great," the young man said. "One of our most reliable guys. Never any drama, you know. Unlike," he stopped himself. "Unlike?" I prompted. "Nothing, just office politics. But David's solid. You'd be in good hands with him." I thanked him and hung up. No mention of investigations or fraud. No hint that David was anything other than exactly what he appeared to be, a decent, boring man doing his job. Next, I tried searching public records for any investigations involving David or his firm. Nothing. No criminal charges, no civil suits, no indication that he was under any kind of scrutiny. Which meant either Marcus had lied to Emma about the investigation, or it was so recent and confidential that it hadn't gone public yet. I needed to talk to David directly, but I couldn't just ask him, "Are you being investigated for fraud?" without explaining how I'd come by that information. And explaining meant admitting I'd read Emma's private messages, which would destroy what little trust still existed in our family. So I did something that, looking back, was either brilliant or insane. I invited David to lunch, just the two of us. Told him I wanted to talk about Christmas gifts for Emma and the kids, but really, I wanted to watch his face, listen to his words, see if I could detect the guilt of someone hiding criminal activity. We met at a small cafe downtown on Thursday afternoon. David arrived exactly on time, as he always did, wearing his usual uniform of khakis and a button-down shirt, looking tired but pleased to see me. "This is nice," he said, sitting across from me. "We never really get to talk one-on-one." "I know. I feel like I barely see you anymore, even at family gatherings." "Emma's been busy," he said carefully. "The new case at her firm is demanding." I watched his face as he said this. He looked worn down, like someone carrying a weight he couldn't name, but not guilty, not like someone involved in fraud, just sad. "How are things with you two?" I asked, keeping my tone light, motherly. He paused, looked at his coffee. "They're fine." "David, I'm her mother. I know when someone's lying." He smiled weakly. "Okay, they're not great, but we're working through it." Marriage is hard, right? Especially with work stress and the kids and just life. "What kind of work stress?" His expression shifted slightly. "Wary now. Just the usual. Deadlines, difficult clients." "Nothing more serious than that?" "Like what?" "I don't know. Legal trouble? Investigations?" I said it casually, but I was watching his face intently, and what I saw was genuine confusion. "Investigations? No. Why would you— Has Emma said something?" "No, I worry. You hear stories about firms getting in trouble for cutting corners, falsifying documents. I wanted to make sure you weren't involved in anything like that." "Margaret," he leaned forward, his voice earnest. "I promise you, I'm not involved in anything illegal. Our firm is clean. I'm clean. Whatever you've heard, it's not true." I believed him. Not because I wanted to, but because everything about his demeanor, the confusion, the immediate denial, the earnest reassurance, rang true. David wasn't under investigation. Marcus had lied. But why? "Has Marcus mentioned anything about investigations?" I asked, watching his reaction. David's face clouded. "Marcus? No. Why?" "Just curious. He works at your firm. I thought maybe he'd mention something." "Marcus and I don't really talk much anymore." "Why not? I thought you were best friends." "We were, but—" He stopped, clearly debating how much to say. "Things changed. He's been different lately, distant, sometimes hostile. I don't know what I did to upset him, but our friendship isn't what it used to be." I felt my stomach tighten. Marcus pulling away from David. Marcus telling Emma lies about David. Marcus positioning himself as the hero who would save Emma from her fraudulent husband. This wasn't about love. This was about something else, something darker. "Do you trust him?" I asked. "Marcus? I used to. Now, I honestly don't know." We finished lunch. I hugged David goodbye and watched him walk back to his car, shoulders slumped, moving like someone who's already lost something but couldn't quite identify what. And I thought, Emma is throwing away her marriage for a man who's lying to her, a man who's deliberately destroying her husband's reputation to steal his wife. I had to find out why, had to understand what Marcus Chen really wanted, and I had less than 2 weeks until Christmas. That evening, I did what any reasonable 60-year-old woman would do. I stalked Marcus Chen on social media, like a teenager investigating her crush. His Facebook was carefully curated. Photos from expensive restaurants, exotic travel destinations, art gallery openings. He presented himself as cultured, sophisticated, successful. There were photos from firm events showing him with David and other colleagues, all smiling like friends. The most recent photos with David were from 18 months ago, right around when the affair with Emma started. His Instagram was similar, but as I scrolled back through years of posts, I noticed something. 3 years ago, Marcus had been engaged. Her name was Rachel, and she appeared in dozens of photos. Beautiful, smiling, clearly in love. Then suddenly, around 2.5 years ago, she disappeared from his feed. No explanation, no farewell post, just gone. I Googled Marcus Chen-Rachel engagement and found a wedding website. They'd been planning to marry in the summer of 2023, but according to the site's last update, the wedding had been canceled. I kept digging, found Rachel's Instagram. Her bio said she lived in Seattle now. Her recent posts show her married to someone else, happy, no mention of Marcus Chen. I sent her a message. It was bold, possibly crazy, but I was running out of time. Hi, Rachel. I know this is strange, but I'm looking into Marcus's background and saw you were once engaged to him. Would you be willing to talk? It's important. I didn't expect a response, but 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a notification. Rachel had replied. Has he done something? Please tell me you're not dating him. It's my daughter who's involved with him. I'm trying to understand who he really is. Can we talk on the phone? This is too much to type. We exchanged numbers. Rachel called immediately, and what she told me over the next hour made everything click into place. The lies about David, the affair with Emma, the timing of it all. Marcus isn't who he pretends to be, Rachel began. Her voice was steady, but underneath, I heard old pain. When I met him 4 years ago, he seemed perfect, successful, charming, attentive. He moved fast. We were engaged within 6 months. But then I started noticing things. What things? He was obsessed with keeping up appearances, with seeming more successful than he actually was. He spent money we didn't have on expensive clothes, fancy dinners, trying to impress people who didn't care about him. And he was jealous, intensely jealous, of anyone he perceived as having more than him. More success, more money, more respect. Like David, I said slowly. Exactly like David. Marcus talked about David constantly, how David's projects won awards, how clients loved David, how David had the perfect wife and kids and life. He was consumed with comparing himself to David and always coming up short. What happened to your engagement? I found out he'd been embezzling from the firm, small amounts at first, then larger. He needed money to maintain the lifestyle he was pretending to have. When I confronted him, he begged me to stay quiet, said he'd pay it back, but I couldn't. I told him I was going to the firm, so he beat me to it. My heart stopped. What do you mean? He went to the partners and accused David of the embezzlement, said he'd discovered it, that he had proof, that David had been stealing for months. He had falsified documents that made David look guilty. The firm fired him quietly to avoid scandal, made him pay back what he'd stolen. David was cleared completely. I felt everything slot into place, and Marcus blamed David. Totally. In Marcus's mind, if David had just taken the fall, accepted the blame, then Marcus could have kept his job and his reputation. David fighting back and proving his innocence meant Marcus lost everything. So Marcus has spent the past 2 years planning revenge. By sleeping with David's wife. Is that what he's doing? God, that's so predictably him. Destroy David's marriage, make himself look like the hero, turn David's wife against him. It's exactly the kind of twisted logic Marcus would use. Rachel, why didn't you warn anyone? Why didn't you tell David? I tried. I called David after everything came out, told him to be careful, that Marcus would come after him eventually. But I think David didn't take me seriously. He's a good person. He probably couldn't imagine someone being that vengeful. And the firm let Marcus work there again? Different firm. Marcus moved to a smaller company, worked his way up, then got hired back to David's firm a year ago when they expanded. I don't think David had any say in the hiring. I thanked Rachel and hung up, sat in my kitchen as the sun set, thinking about Marcus Chen, a man so consumed with envy and rage that he'd spent 2 years planning an elaborate revenge. He'd gotten himself hired back at David's firm, befriended Emma, started an affair, convinced her that David was involved in fraud, the same fraud Marcus himself had committed, and now he was positioning himself to steal David's wife, destroy David's reputation, and walk away with everything David had while David lost it all. And Emma had no idea she was a weapon in someone else's war. I had 10 days until Christmas. 10 days to figure out how to save my daughter from making the biggest mistake of her life without revealing that I'd been reading her private messages and stalking her lover's ex-fiancé. I started by reaching out to the partners at David's firm, called on a Friday morning claiming to be writing an article about sustainable architecture. I used to teach high school English. Research was in my skill set. Asked about their most successful projects. They talked glowingly about David's work. When I casually mentioned Marcus Chen, the tone shifted. Marcus is capable, one partner said carefully, but he's not at David's level. Different priorities. What do you mean? David cares about the work. Marcus cares about the credit. Another piece confirmed. Marcus was still bitter, still comparing himself to David, still coming up short. Next, I talked to parents from Jake and Sophie's school, people who'd seen Emma and David at events who might have noticed changes in their relationship. What I heard broke my heart. Emma had been increasingly absent from school functions over the past year. David came alone, apologizing for Emma's work commitments. He'd taken over volunteering for the kids' activities, hosting playdates, doing the things Emma used to do. David was being a father. Emma was having an affair and planning to leave, but positioning herself as the victim who needed to escape her fraudulent husband. By the time Monday arrived, 1 week before Christmas, I'd built a complete picture. Marcus was a vengeful narcissist who'd spent 2 years grooming my daughter to destroy her husband. Emma, stressed and unhappy in her marriage, had been vulnerable to someone who made her feel special, who listened to her complaints about David's boring stability, who offered excitement and passion and the promise of a more interesting life. She had no idea she was being used, no idea that Marcus's interest in her had nothing to do with love and everything to do with revenge against David. I had to tell her, had to find a way to make her see the truth before she blew up her family at Christmas dinner. But I knew Emma. She was stubborn, defensive when criticized, unlikely to believe that she'd been manipulated. If I came at her directly with accusations, she'd shut down, refuse to listen. I needed proof, something undeniable, something that would make her question Marcus's motives and investigate herself. And I knew exactly how to get it. On Thursday, 3 days before Christmas, I invited Marcus to coffee, told him I wanted to discuss Emma's Christmas gift, something special I was planning. He agreed immediately, probably thinking he needed to stay in my good graces. We met at the same cafe where I'd had lunch with David. Marcus arrived in an expensive suit, all charm and warmth, playing the role of devoted boyfriend concerned about his partner's mother's approval. Marcus, thank you for reaching out. I've been wanting to talk to you. Have you? Yes. I know this situation with Emma is complicated. I want you to know my intentions are serious. I love her. I love the kids. I want to do right by all of you. I smiled, watching him perform sincerity. That's wonderful to hear. Tell me, Marcus, how long have you been planning this? His smile faltered slightly. Planning what? The affair, the revenge against David, the systematic destruction of my daughter's marriage as payback for David exposing your embezzlement 2 years ago. His face went completely still. Then he laughed, but it sounded forced. I have no idea what you're talking about. I spoke to Rachel, your ex-fiancée. She told me everything about the embezzlement, the false accusations against David, your termination from the firm. Should I continue? Marcus's mask cracked. For just a moment, I saw the rage underneath, cold, calculating, terrifying. Then he smoothed it over, rebuilt the charm. Rachel is bitter. She lied about me to cover her own theft. Everyone knows that. Do they? Because I also spoke to the partners at your old firm. They confirmed Rachel's story. You embezzled, you tried to frame David, you failed. You've been busy. His voice had changed. No more warmth, just calculation. Does Emma know you're investigating me? Not yet, but she will, unless you leave. Now, today. End the affair, leave town, and never contact my daughter again. He laughed, real amusement this time. Or what? You'll tell her I'm a bad guy? She won't believe you. She loves me. She's leaving David for me. In 3 days, at your precious Christmas dinner, she's going to announce she wants a divorce and there's nothing you can stop it. She's only leaving David because you lied about her, told her he was involved in fraud, poisoned her against him. I gave her permission to leave. She was unhappy. I offered her a way out. You manipulated her, used her as a weapon against David. Marcus leaned forward, and for the first time I saw the real him, cruel, petty, consumed with bitterness. David took everything from me, my job, my reputation, my future. So yes, I'm taking his wife, his perfect little life, and Emma is choosing me, not because I manipulated her, but because David is boring and I'm not. Because I make her feel alive and David makes her feel trapped. You can try to stop it, but you'll just alienate her. She'll choose me anyway, and you'll lose your daughter in the process. He stood up. Enjoy Christmas dinner, Marcus. It's going to be very interesting. He walked out. I sat there holding my cold coffee, my hands shaking, thinking, he's right. If I tell Emma, she won't believe me. She'll think I'm meddling, trying to control her life, unable to accept that her marriage failed. I needed something more, something that would expose Marcus so completely that even Emma couldn't deny what he was. And then I remembered. Emma's laptop, still logged into her email, still sitting on my counter at home where she'd left it days ago. Marcus had been emailing her, planning with her, and if I was right about him, if he was as narcissistic and arrogant as I believed, he'd kept evidence of his real plan. Proof that this wasn't about love. I drove home, opened Emma's laptop, and searched Marcus's emails. Found what I needed in an exchange with someone named Tyler from 2 months ago. Tyler, how's Operation Destroy Dave going? Marcus, perfect. Emma's ready to leave him. I've got her convinced he's garbage. Christmas dinner is going to be spectacular. Public humiliation, lost family, destroyed reputation, everything he did to me. Tyler, and after? You staying with her? Marcus, hell no. Once the divorce is filed and Dave's miserable, I'm done. The whole point was revenge, not an actual relationship. Emma's too high maintenance anyway. There it was, written criff that Marcus was using Emma, that he'd never intended to stay with her, that this entire affair was about hurting David. I screenshot everything, printed copies, put them in an envelope. And then I planned Christmas dinner. Christmas Eve arrived with perfect snow and terrible tension. Emma came over to help with food preparation, moving through my kitchen with practiced efficiency, chatting about work and the kids and how excited she was for tomorrow's dinner. She didn't mention the divorce announcement she was planning, didn't mention Marcus or David or the bomb she intended to drop. I watched her chop vegetables and thought about the little girl she'd been, the one who cried at second place, who needed everything to be perfect, who never learned that failure and messy complexity were just part of being human. I'd failed her somewhere, given her perfectionism when I should have given her grace. But tomorrow, I was giving her truth, whether she wanted it or not. Christmas Day dawned bright and cold. The house filled gradually. David and the kids first, then David's sister and her family, then my sister Joan, who always brought too much wine, then finally Emma, who arrived separately with an overnight bag, planning to leave David that evening, I assumed, and a tight smile. Marcus arrived last, all charm and expensive wine, hugging me like we were friends, shaking David's hand like they were still best friends. I watched David's face. He looked confused by Marcus's presence, clearly hadn't known Emma invited him. We ate, we opened presents. The kids were loud and happy, oblivious to the adults' tension. David's sister asked pointed questions about why Emma had come separately. Joan drank too much wine and started telling inappropriate stories. It was exactly like every Christmas, chaotic and imperfect and real. At 7 p.m., as we were finishing dessert, Emma stood up, clinked her wine glass for attention. I have an announcement. Here it came. I tensed, ready. This is hard, but I need to say it. David and I... Actually, I interrupted, standing up, I have something to share first, if you don't mind, Emma. She looked annoyed. Mom, this is important. So is this. Please, just give me 5 minutes. I pulled out the envelope. Emma's face went pale. She recognized her printed emails. Mom, what are you... I found some emails, I said calmly, by accident, 3 weeks ago. Emails that concerned me. So I did some investigating. I looked at Marcus. Would you like to explain to everyone what Operation Destroy Dave means, or should I? The room went completely silent. Marcus's face was a fascinating study in panic and rage. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Because I have printed copies of your emails discussing how you've been using Emma to get revenge on David, how you planned to destroy David's reputation and steal his wife as payback for exposing your embezzlement 2 years ago, how you lied to Emma about David being under investigation for fraud that you committed, by the way, and how you never intended to actually stay with Emma once the divorce was filed because, and I quote, the whole point was revenge, not an actual relationship. I handed the papers to Emma, watched her read them, watched her face change from confusion to horror to devastation. Marcus, she said quietly, tell me this isn't real. He tried to salvage it. Emma, she's lying. She fabricated. These are your words, your email address, your account. Her voice was shaking. You used me? This entire year you were just using me to hurt David? It's not like that. Get out. Her voice was steel now. Get out of my house. Get out of my life. Emma, please. Now. Marcus left, slunk out like the coward he was, all his charm gone, just a small, bitter man whose revenge had failed. The room erupted, David's sister demanding explanations, Joan pouring more wine, the kids confused and upset, and Emma collapsed into a chair, crying, while David stood there looking shell-shocked and betrayed and heartbroken all at once. I gave them space. Let Emma's sobs fill the room, let the truth settle. Finally, Emma looked up at David. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I believed him. I thought, God, I don't even know what I thought. I was unhappy and he made me feel special and Did you love him? David asked quietly. I don't know. Maybe. But he didn't love me. He never did. Did you love me? Do you still? Emma was quiet for a long time. Then, yes. I think I forgot how to show it, but yes. Then, we have something to work with. They talked for hours that night. The rest of us eventually left, giving them privacy. I took the kids to my house for a sleepover. When I picked Emma up the next morning, she looked exhausted but lighter somehow. Thank you, she said. I know I should be angry that you read my emails. I know that was a violation. But thank you. You're welcome. Are you and David? I don't know yet. We're going to try therapy, see if we can rebuild. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having is. She hugged me, really hugged me, not the perfunctory squeeze we'd been exchanging for years. I'm sorry, Mom, for all of it. I know, sweetheart, I know. It's been 6 months now since that Christmas dinner. Emma and David are in counseling, working through the betrayal and the underlying problems that made Emma vulnerable to Marcus's manipulation. They're taking it slow, both committed to rebuilding their marriage on honesty instead of resentment. Marcus left town 3 weeks after Christmas, got a job in another state, ran away from the consequences of his actions. I heard through the grapevine that David's firm reported Marcus's threats and harassment to the State Bar Association. He won't work as an architect again. Emma apologized to David's family, started showing up to the kids' school events again, began rebuilding relationships she'd neglected during the affair. It's slow, painful work, but she's doing it. And me? I learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give your children isn't protection from pain, but the truth that helps them protect themselves. That Tuesday afternoon, when I accidentally found Emma's email, I thought my world was ending. Turned out, it was just transforming, shedding comfortable lies for uncomfortable truths. Christmas is coming again, and this year, when we gather around my table, we'll be different people. Humbler, more honest, more aware of our own capacity for self-deception. The decorations will be the same, the food familiar, the traditions intact. But underneath, everything has changed. And that might just be the best gift of all.